Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. India and the European Union finalise a free trade agreement after 2 decades of talks. EU chief Ursula von der Leyen says the deal creates a 2 billion person market. In a visit to Beijing, Finland's Prime Minister says China can help end Russia's war by pressuring President Putin. President Xi calls for upholding a UN-centred global order. Russian attacks across Ukraine kill 4 people and wound nearly 24, officials say. President Zelensky says the strikes undermine peace efforts and call for more pressure on Moscow. Top federal immigration leaders begin leaving Minneapolis after a second US citizen is fatally shot by officers. The White House turns to border czar Tom Homan to take control as tensions remain high. North Korea launches 2 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan, according to South Korea. The projectiles splashed down outside Japan's ease in Pyongyang's second test this month. China says it is ready to deepen cooperation with Britain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer visits this week. Starmer is set to meet President Xi Jinping and other senior Chinese leaders. France backs a ban on social media for under-15s under a new bill. The EU says it will be responsible for enforcing age verification on platforms. One battle after another and Sinners top this year's BAFTA shortlist. Both films also dominate Oscar nominations ahead of the March ceremony. We start this hour in South Asia, and India and the European Union have finalised a landmark trade deal hailed as the largest in India's history, creating a market of 2 billion people. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, alongside the European Council President Antonio Costa and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, celebrated the agreement, which aims to strengthen global supply chains and foster innovation partnerships. The deal is expected to double EU exports to India by 2032 by removing tariffs on 96.6% of traded goods, saving European companies up to €4 billion in duties. The EU will reduce tariffs on 99.5% of goods over 7 years, with specific reductions on Indian marine goods, leather textiles and metals. Let's take a listen into what the leaders had to say.
जो एफटीए भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन के बीच इन्वेस्टमेंट को बूस्ट करेगा, नई इनोवेशन पार्टनरशिप बनाएगा और वैश्विक स्तर पर सप्लाई चेन को मजबूत करेगा। यानी यह सिर्फ ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट नहीं है, यह साझा समृद्धि का नया ब्लूप्रिंट है। फ्रेंड्स, इस महत्वाकांक्षी एफटीए के साथ साथ हम मोबिलिटी के लिए भी एक नया फ्रेमवर्क बना रहे हैं। इससे भारत के स्टूडेंट्स, वर्कर्स और प्रोफेशनल्स के लिए यूरोपियन यूनियन में नए अवसर खुलेंगे। फ्रेंड्स, आज ग्लोबल ऑर्डर में बड़ी उथल-पुथल है। ऐसे में भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन की साझेदारी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सिस्टम में स्थिरता को मजबूती देगी।
At a time when the global order is being fundamentally reshaped, the European Union and India stand together as a strategic and reliable partners. Today, we are taking our partnership to the next level. As the 2 largest democracies in the world, we are working hand in hand to deliver concrete benefits for our citizens and to shape a resilient global order that underpins peace and stability, economic growth, and sustainable development.
This trade will integrate further our supply chain and strengthen our joint manufacturing power. It will cut up to 4 billion euros in annual tariffs for exporters of all sizes. And it will create good jobs for millions of workers here in India and in Europe. At the same time, this agreement will build on the natural complementarity of our economies. It brings together Indian skills, services and scale with Europe's technology, capital and innovation. It will create levels of growth that neither side can achieve alone. And by combining these strengths, we reduce strategic dependencies at a time when trade is increasingly weaponized.
We move on now, and the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says he spoke with US President Donald Trump discussing Canada's arrangement with China and the opportunity to move forward on CUSMA. Carney made clear that he has not walked back on comments he made at the Davos Economic Forum. The Canadian leader stressed that Ottawa is responding to changes in US trade policy while seeking a path forward on North American trade cooperation. The comments come amid ongoing trade tensions and heightened scrutiny of Canada's economic relationships with both the United States and China. Joining us now to discuss this is Mark Sutherland. He is a geopolitical commentator. He joins me live from London. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this situation with Canada caught in the middle of two of the world's superpowers. We heard from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claiming that Carney had walked back on some of his comments made at Davos, which of course made quite the rounds on social media and other platforms, talking about the reshaping of the new global order, etc. Do you think Canada will benefit from this situation? Of course, Donald Trump threatens 100% tariffs on the country, but many people think that Mark Carney is doing the right thing by standing up to Donald Trump. And of course, that speech at Davos made quite the impact. What were your thoughts on the situation?
Thomas, good to be with you. To be honest, my guidance is to look at Mark Carney, what he has done in the past as a job, look at what he has been also responsible to arriving where Canada is at this present time, to look at the Canadian, even under Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, their links then with China. And of course, recently Carney has just been over to then sit down with Xi Jinping and co and say, as establish a new world order, which caught the eye of so many. You have to go through his history as head of the Bank of Canada, the International Bank of Settlements in Basel, then as head of Bank of England, and then someone that has been putting forward all of the policies in regard to net zero. You look at Canada, where their fuel prices are going to go up, their food prices are going through the roof, and inflation is there. There are many people in Canada that are not happy with him whatsoever. Now, he will say whatever he wants to on the world stage. It's what happens at home. And of course, before he was elected, it was suddenly, elbows up, and I will be able to deal with Mr. Trump, etc. What's rather interesting is why suddenly a hedge fund that he is also part of then suddenly moves to New York. There are many questions that have to be asked about Carney and what he stands for. And frankly, in my own humble opinion, there are many Canadians that are furious with him, even furious that he is actually the Prime Minister of Canada. And just finally, understanding Canadian politics means that you have to understand there's a huge divide between the West and the east of Canada, between French speaking, between English speaking, and the heritage of that, because people like Carney predecessors, Justin Trudeau, etc., the last thing they want is an oil industry, and that is what is on the west coast, and that is what actually provides funding for the economic powerhouse of Canada. And by them swallowing all the net zero nonsense, it's actually putting Canada and the economy of Canada and the people of Canada in a very, very dangerous position to say, what economy do we have left as we see prices go up? Thomas, finally, you have to read between the lines. Carney will say things publicly. It's in the side rooms in Davos that people are all on these negotiating. People are always very, very concerned. One of the reasons why in the UK we have swallowed all the net zero nonsense is because when he was head of the Bank of England. Thomas.
Of course, Carney has no doubtably put a strong voice to Canada's foreign policy. However, the results are still pending, launching Ottawa into the global strategic conversation. Could this be an early case for how much autonomy middle powers like Canada will be allowed inside an increasing bipolar global economy?
Well, the issue is, as you said, you've raised a bipolar. We've got Russia, we've got China, we've got America. We've got America then turning around and flexing its muscles, saying there's only going to be one hegemony, and that is us. We have to. The other thing is that Carney has said, in my opinion, some appalling things in regard to America, and then suddenly realizing that Canada, quite rightly, and as I have many friends, a number of friends, dear friends there, they need to trade with America. It's their biggest trading partner, which they border, and they need to have that trade. And one of the other things that Carney needs to do is then focus on the illicit drugs and the illegal drugs that come over the border into America, fentanyl, etc. That he needs to take that as a priority and stop that, and also where that comes from, which is Chinese links.
Of course, Mark. Of course, critics. It's all right. Critics would say, of course, Donald Trump threatened annexation against Ottawa. Now, whether that was a joke or just Trump being Trump, those are, of course, statements that invoked fear into Canadians. Speaking to many Canadians and saying it was the top of their news bulletins every single day when this was going on. And one critic might say, why wouldn't Canada respond in such a way to Donald Trump if he's making statements like that?
I would agree with you, and actually those comments were very unhelpful. That if President Trump had been quiet, then it would have actually helped Carney not to win the Prime Minister of Canada, and we would have had Poilievre as the Prime Minister, in my own personal opinion, and that is then borne out by certain discussions. The other thing is, as President Trump does again, I am again diplomatically rattling a load of cages. Whether people like this next statement or not, politely, I'm not really bothered. But the issue is this: is that Carney is a total and utter globalist. I also have his book, and it's one, and I advise people to read it, because then when you read it, you will then find out what he is really like and why Canada is in the position that it is. And I will say this: that on the east coast of Canada, Ottawa, etc., he then frightened many Canadian retirees, and Trump did, hence they then voted for Carney, but then not also understanding the fact that Canada needs industry. And one of the beautiful products that is God-given, which is oil, is one of the ways that it actually provides that industry and finance and the economic powerhouse for Canada, and that is not understood by Carney et al. Because they don't believe in that, because they've swallowed all the net zero propaganda, in my humble opinion.
Mark,
Thomas,
do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And we turn to the United States, and the California governor, Gavin Newsom, has announced an investigation into TikTok's claims that the app is censoring content critical of President Trump. The probe comes after thousands of US users reported problems following TikTok's recent sale to a Trump-aligned business group, including zero views on new posts and missing political content. Some posts critical of federal actions, such as the Minneapolis shooting of Alex Pretty, were reportedly suppressed. TikTok attributes the issues to a major infrastructure outage at a data center, but Newsom's office says he has independently confirmed instances of content suppression. Social media users and some celebrities have voiced concerns over censorship under the app's new ownership. TikTok's US parent, TikTok USDS joint venture LLC, says user data is safe and it is working to fix technical issues. The investigation will examine whether the company violated California law and will review the app's content moderation practices. Mark, of course, this is a huge situation. Of course, TikTok 100 million users across the United States, now majoritarily in American hands. A political tool as well, of course. If these claims about Donald Trump and the turn out to be true, what would be the implications of that? We know the owners now, and some would be seen as, of course, Trump allies. Would there be consequences if Donald Trump content, anti-Trump content, was indeed being censored?
Well, here, this is rather interesting when the boot's on the other foot, and we only have to look at Gavin Newsom, who is, in my humble opinion, is a complete and utter socialist and communist, and the number one person he does not like is President Donald Trump. Plus, he could be lining up for a presidential run in 2028. We also have to look at some of the comments in his behavior in regard to Davos. This is rather interesting. Under the previous regime of Biden, we have then seen the tactics used against President Trump and against Republicans and his voting base, especially in regard to the Jan 6 and locking up 1,600 people, innocent Americans, in regard to that. And then you have to look at how the mainstream media is then manipulated. I asked people to research Project Mockingbird in regard to that. I will say this, Thomas, that let's see the evidence. Let's see the evidence. We've had 4 years before that, leading up to 2016. It was all Hillary Clinton in regard to Russia. We then had that from 16 to 20, Russia. You then had from 20 to 24, impeach, do this, impeach, etc. And then set up some star chamber, as I say, of prosecuting innocent Americans in regard to J6. As we often say, if the propaganda suits our side, then we're just gonna shut our mouths and turn a blind eye. But actually, the manipulation in the past has been so huge. We want the truth. I can't make any comments in regard to the whole TikTok thing. Yes, I'm fully aware to some extent of who owns that now and where that has come from. But accusations of manipulation is very easy to make. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens, and then prove that, and then move from that point. But I will say this: in the past, platforms, whether that's been Facebook, YouTube, et al., we look at how much they have then, and Twitter before it became X. We then look at how they were manipulating, especially in 2016, before that presidential vote, and then the winning of President Trump, and then over then to a couple of years after that, there has been a bit of a loosening up in that regard, to censorship. Hence why Elon Musk then bought Twitter and turned it into X. So that it's a huge subject. It's a huge subject, Thomas. To you.
Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX. Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you as always. Now, France, in coordination with the United States and European allies, issued a joint statement urging Syria's government and Kurdish forces to prevent any security vacuum that could benefit the Islamic State group. The statement released after a foreign ministry meeting in Paris emphasised the importance of maintaining focused collective efforts against ISIS. It also called on all parties involved to avoid any security lapses in and around ISIS detention centres where the group's prisoners are held. The plea underscores ongoing concerns over the resurgence of IS in the region. Joining us now is Major General Sudhakar G. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert. He joins us live from Jaipur. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX. It's a pleasure to have you as always. Major General G, does this joint statement reflect genuine confidence in Syria's government and Kurdish forces, or deep anxiety that neither side can fully control the situation?
Yeah, but Thomas, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show. There is a deep concern that the ISIS, with whom there is an ongoing talk, may take advantage of the situation. They may exploit and use it to rejuvenate in full form. So this danger, now for our audience, they need to understand what's going on. It's the northeastern portion of Syria, where you have the Syrian Democratic Forces. It's the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Force. It is backed by USA, and their domination is towards the northeastern portion of Syria, which has got a huge reserve of oil, and there is an all-out effort being extended by USA to reintegrate the Kurds with the Syrian country. And the new Damascus government, after Bashar al-Assad was ousted or overthrown sometime way back in December 2024, there has been an attempt by USA is trying to broker and reintegrate, recognize the language, and accept Kurdish people as an established entity of the region back into the system. So this is a kind of a temporary cutout or negotiated kind of a concession which is taking place to a ceasefire. And amidst that, the detainees, the ISIS detainees, they are required to be transferred, and the talks are on, but there are very reliable inputs coming from the ground that the ISIS is making an all-out effort to revive their full form and full potential of the military capability as was existing way back in 2017. That's a very dangerous thing which is happening, and hence France, along with other like-minded countries from Europe, along with the US, they have issued out a joint statement of concern. I tend to agree with this concern unless the vacuums are prevented from falling into the hands of ISIS. It may so happen that in this activity of reintegrating the Kurdish into the system of Syria, I apprehend that there may be some spots which have been left vacant by the Syrian forces. They may be occupied by the ISIS. I am also extending my concern. The Syrian government would do well to pay attention to this particular issue. Back to Thomas.
Yeah, and does this statement suggest that Western powers see ISIS as a more immediate threat, of course, than state-to-state tensions in Syria, which, of course, continue to be ongoing?
ISIS continues to be a threat even now, despite our assertion and claim of Western alliances that they have been decimated. The backbone of ISIS was completely destroyed way back in 2017. They continue to remain active in the region, and they pose a huge potential threat towards the peace and stability of the region, as also the European countries and American domestic, the homeland security. I also wish to add one more point, that ISIS being what it is, let's not ignore the fact that consequent to our claimed decimation of their backbone and the leadership in 2017, ISIS has spread its wings The splinter groups have gone towards the Northwest Africa. They now dominate the complete Sahel region of the Central Africa. They have a Levante group which is dominating the Syria and the Mediterranean coast, and also this belt of northern Iraq, and also the ISIS coalition, which has got a caliphate across the Central Asian Republic. They're all out to actually establish a global caliphate cutting across South Asia right up to Australia and New Zealand. So therefore, to take them on the face value will be highly dangerous. Back to you, Thomas.
Yes, Major General G, thank you as always for joining us. Of course, it's a great pleasure to have you on at the programme. We now move on, and Gaza's Rafah border crossing with Egypt is set to reopen very soon, offering a crucial route for residents in the war-torn territory. This crossing is the only entry point that bypasses Israel, making it essential for the movement of people and goods. The reopening is expected to allow families separated by the conflict to reunite and give residents outside Gaza the chance to return home. After weeks of blockade and limited access, this reopening provides a rare window for movement and essential supplies. For residents of Gaza, it brings hopes for improved living conditions and a step towards reconnecting with the outside world. Let's listen in to some reactions coming in from Gaza.
بالنسبة لي كمواطن معبر رفح مهم جدا إلي. لما ابني بده يطلع يتعلم أو بده يطلع يتعالج أو بده يطلع لمنحة دراسية أو بده يطلع لأي شيء أو بده يسافر أو بدي أنا أسافر مثلا، فمهم جدا إنه يكون في بحبوحة في موضوع المعبر. وليش ما برجع المعبر مثلا قبل ما كان أيام 7 أكتوبر أو قبل ما كان يعني قبل 7 أكتوبر؟ والمشكلة
نشعر رغم الألم والغصة التي في قلوبنا بفرح كبير لخبر افتتاح أو عودة فتح معبر رفح حتى يتسنى لنا جميعا إما للمغادرة للعلاج وإما لإدخال معدات إعادة إعمار ما دمره الاحتلال على مدار عامين.
احنا مبسوطين كثير بأخبار فتح معبر رفح، وبنتمنى إنه إن شاء الله نفوت المرحلة الثانية. اللي طالعين برا غزة يرجعوا يلمشوا منهم هنا، المرضى اللي موجودين في قطاع غزة والإصابات تطلع برا وتتعالج، تتعمر بيوتنا، نرجع لأراضينا. هذا الأخبار بتفرح.
Now, Spain will pay nearly $24 million in compensation to victims of last week's high-speed train crash in Ademuz, Cordoba. The deadly accident killed 45 people and injured more than 150, making it one of the highest train fatality tolls in recent European history. Transport Minister Oscar Puente said he is performing his duties to the best of his abilities, while authorities work to support victims and ensure safety moves forward. Let's listen in to what the Spain Transport Minister Oscar Puente had to say.
Hacer el gobierno es abonar inmediatamente 72.000 euros en concepto de indemnización a fondo perdido, no, obviamente sin exenta de tributación, y otros 72.000 como anticipo a las cantidades que eventualmente y en su día percibirán las víctimas con cargo al seguro de responsabilidad civil. Total, entre ayudas y adelantos, las cantidades ascienden a 20 millones de euros, 10 correspondientes a ayudas y 10 correspondientes.
Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.